Well, what would you like to see in education, or perhaps injected back into education, or
Well, I would certainly like to get rid of the idea that it's all about a fixed curriculum that must be covered in a certain way. This de-skills teachers and deprives them of their autonomy, and teachers only teach well on things about which they are not just knowledgeable but enthusiastic. I was lucky enough to grow up in a culture in which teachers had much more freedom to teach to us or talk to us and discuss with us things that they happen to be interested in. And sooner or later you get to talk about most things that you need to talk about. But you also have to do some hard work on your own. You shouldn't be spoon-fed. Sooner in life you get away from the idea that you just need to do these things and that's what it says and you'll get full marks. Is a very, we need to get rid of that quite early on.
So the pupil becomes a passive
recipient rather than, it's not about stuffing things into children, it's about drawing things out of them. And it's a cliche that the word education actually means to lead out from somewhere, not to put in. And we are now living in a world in which it seems that education is about acquiring information passively. Go into a classroom, you're told the stuff, you write it down, you learn it, you regurgitate it, and there you have it. This is particularly disruptive when it comes to the humanities. You may get away with that in the sciences, but in the humanities, it's very important that you should be freed. In fact, that's the point of studying humanities, to see that there isn't one narrow way of looking at the world. And therefore, free thinking is important. Disciplined free thinking, not just going, whatever comes into my head. But that combination of freedom and discipline, there's another example of opposites that must go together. If there's no discipline, there's no freedom. So I think there needs to be a proper balance of discipline and freedom. There needs to be a proper balance of encouragement and clarity about boundaries. That this is not good enough, this is not working, and you need to do more of this. I think the syllabus needs to be strongly based on a humanistic core. In other words, that people should study literature and history and philosophy, and not just history as a list of things we now disapprove of that people did in the past. That's just indoctrination. We need to encourage to think, well, people didn't always see the world the way you see it, you see. And they weren't necessarily at all stupid. So we need to see the variety.
Or evil.
Or evil. Yeah. So we need to sophisticate people's ideas of what is good, what is right, to understand what they have inherited, because the culture that they belong to was built on the backs of many people's sacrifices, and not to know that and not to be prepared to do your part to uphold it is a great loss. And nowadays a lot of education is about disrespect for the past, because it doesn't conform to our narrow standards now. And if you use this lens to look at literature, I really can't abide to think what goes on in literature seminars these days, or teaching it in schools. It seems to be so much about not trying to change your mindset so that you're liberated to appreciate this awe-inspiring and beautiful work of art, but somehow pathetically, with the little that you know and understand, sitting in judgment on it because the attitudes displayed don't fit with your whatever ism that you happen to espouse at the moment. I mean, we should be getting away from all the isms. I don't believe that there is a place for subjects called Marxist, feminist, race, whatever studies. That is something that can be taken up. It can be an ingredient in an overall picture of how you look at things, but it shouldn't be the tail that wags the dog. Because what you're doing in that case is simply reducing everything to an example of a theory that you've already decided is right. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say there's also white studies now, which is I think that's in America. It's basically all the problematic ones.
Absolutely, it's the inverse of black studies, in which one says how marvelous black culture is white studies, in which one apologises for all the things that actually build Western civilization.
It's a bit too black and white.
It's a bit too.
That's not the sort of joke that you can get away with very often.
Well, in that case, we should be making a lot more of them, and we should not be apologising.
So you mentioned isms, and really we're talking about ideologies.
Yes, exactly.
Ism, and it seems to be that an ideology is a very contained, jagged way of encapsulating a series of beliefs which tend to be non-flexible, you know, and they tend to not change or adapt to changing circumstances or altering conditions. You know. So this is my set of beliefs, and it's relevant to all times and places, forever, and with all people. You know, that to me, or maybe that's the worst kind of ideology. You can have more sort of flexible. You know, I mean, we all need beliefs and so forth. Is an ideology, does it tend to be what the left hemisphere loves to do by concretizing, fixing reality in space and time to a series, to lots of different tenets? Is that really what the left hemisphere likes to do?
It likes to simplify and categorize, and those are examples of it. It also it erects something which is rather comparable to your image of people being processed as they go through the tube, in that what you take is something magnificently rich, complex, and subtle, like a great novel or poem or work of art or whatever it is, and put it through the mill of your particular ism, and lo and behold, you've got a book or a paper or whatever it might be. It's money for old rope. When I was studying English back in the 70s, a lot of the fashionable isms now hadn't come in, but Marxism was very important, and so was deconstructionism and structuralism. And in fact, the reason I wrote a book called Against Criticism was that I felt that even if you didn't subscribe to an ism, and it was much worse if you did subscribe to an ism, what we tended to be doing was turning things into a standard product that would confirm an ideology that we'd already decided was right, rather than being humble towards great works of art from the past and thinking, actually, there's somebody speaking to me here that may have something worthwhile for me to listen to. There was a sort of condescension, a sort of de haut en bas position in which you look down, you, the 20th century critic, looked down on the writer of the past because he or she didn't know the things that you know. And I just thought that was outrageous.
Rather than an openness to what might be there.
Yes.
You're putting you're putting your own stuff on what is, or what you assume is there, rather than being open to what the painting or the novel or the music might be able to offer up.
And you realise how ersatz all this is when you think that actually the STEM subjects, which are also, by the way, very important. I may have sounded as though I thought that education should simply be humanities. Of course it shouldn't. I'm, as always, trying to argue for a balance that I think has got skewed. So we need, and indeed I very much enjoyed mathematics, so we need to have those subjects. And they are important, they just need to be balanced with other things. But what you notice is that all these isms don't tend to get applied to them. And when you're training a doctor or an airline pilot or whatever, there isn't a Marxist version of this. It's too important. We recognise that actually you just need to bloody be good at it. And I don't see really why humanities are not like that. There isn't an ist version of being a good philosopher or a good critic. You are the person that you are. I'd love us to get back to evaluating every person purely on their strengths and their values and what they can offer, absolutely irrespective of what category they belong to. Now, you would have thought that that would be a non-controversial thing to say. Meritocratic, and we should be blind to the categories or boxes that people are in. That was surely the ideal that people of my generation espoused. But I've lived to an Alice in Wonderland world in which actually the only thing that everyone talks about is what box you belong in.
And censorship as well.
Absolutely.
It used to be that there shouldn't be censorship, and maybe that was too extreme in some ways.
Well, I don't think it is.
But it does seem to be now that, you know, people are no platform, deplatformed, cancelled. You can't be exposed to this because you're so delicate and weak that you can't be exposed to this new idea or this conflicting idea because it in some way will cause violence to you just hearing it. It's almost Victorian in its, you know, not being able to see piano legs because they might arouse sexual interest in you.
That's a very nice parallel. But I think, yeah, we do live with this rather rigid cast of mind. And I must say that I have in my lifetime seen free speech, which was pretty much an obvious right of every citizen when I was growing up. And it didn't lead to, you know, appalling aggression. Actually, the aggression, which is sort of everywhere in social media now, has come in the age in which we are restricting people's speech in a way I never think could have happened in this country in my lifetime.
And in a way, it's, if we restrict speech in that way, it's sort of patronising to the people that you're trying to protect, or you claim to be trying to protect, because obviously, really, what's happening is that you're controlling other people, but you're claiming to protect people, perhaps, and then you're being patronising because you're assuming, well, they can't judge whether it's a ridiculous thing to say with this person or not, or an unkind thing for them to say. So we're actually denying agency in people by stopping them being exposed to possibly ridiculousness.
Hidden within it is a sense of smug superiority among people who are the official guardians of the culture, who tend to be broadcasting corporations, newspaper magnates, and the universities, who are, you know, the channels through which the acceptable ideas become solidified. And in the past, they were freer and more open than they are now. I don't know what to think of it, but I don't like it at all. It seems to me that human beings shouldn't be patronised in the sense that they either can't understand certain things, or they won't get it, or they're not bright enough to decide for themselves.
So if you're dumbing something down, then you're patronising.
It's very much a patronising way of thinking, that a certain fossilised set of principles that are just handed out to one particular social group that is university educated and what I call now authoritarian liberal, should be the thing that everybody should espouse. You know, one of the reasons, again, that we have perhaps surprising political outcomes, both in the US and in Britain, is the backlash to people being ignored when they said, but there are other things that need to be taken into account. And that's a shame, because I no more want an extreme government of any form than anyone else. But the way to achieve it is not to say this is right and anything else you say I'm going to just deny you the right to say. You must always give people the right to say things and argue with them hear them out and argue with them on a basis of what you know. And then some genuine bonds might come back. Lots of people will become, yeah, okay, I reckon I was a bit extreme about that. A good conversation, a good dialogue is how we sophisticate our thinking in a culture, not a series of monologues. Monologues are what dictators give.
And it does seem to be that there's an element of wisdom to that seeing the patterns in life and then seeing that if you pull too hard one way, then there's going to be a backlash the other way. And then that's not a reason to pull harder this way, necessarily, which is kind of what happens.
Well, that's right. We're not aware of the negative that's hidden in the thing that we're pushing. And the trouble then is that you think that, well, the trouble is we haven't pushed it hard enough, we need to push more. That's exactly the wrong answer. And I remember this, if I may mention my experience working as a hospital doctor, was that quite often there was a conflict between professional ethic of doctors and nurses and the management ethic that was controlling the professionals. And what we often commented on was that when a management initiative turned out not to work, as we could have told them before they'd started, their response was not, oh, well, that wasn't a success. It was, we didn't do enough of it. Yeah. which is brilliant. And it's typical of the left hemisphere. You know, I know what's right.
More censorship.
More of this, more is obviously needed. And of course then you get more reaction, and so you stoke a war.
Yes, and that's more further proof that you need more of...
Exactly. So that what starts out being liberal, unless it is genuinely liberal and therefore open to hearing everything, you know, ends up narrowing down and producing a totalitarianism of a kind.